In an instant, it seemed, Taim was there. Blue and gold dragons twined around the sleeves of his black coat, staring down at the fellow. His collar bore neither pin. "You would not strike at the Dragon Reborn, Gedwyn," Taim said, at once soft and steely, and the hard-faced man scrambled to his feet, saluting with fist to heart. Rand looked toward where Gawain had been, but all he could see was a large group of men with a white boar banner slashing their way deeper into the surrounding Aiel, with more green-coated men fighting to join them. Taim turned to Rand, that almost smile on his lips. "Under the circumstances, I trust you will not hold it against me, violating your command about confronting Aes Sedai. I had reason to visit you in Carrion, and..." He shrugged. "You look the worse for wear. You will allow me to..." The slight twist of his lips flattened as Rand stepped back from his outstretched hand, pulling Min with him. She hung on tighter than ever. Lews Therin had begun ranting about killing as he always did when Taim appeared, rambling madly about the Forsaken and killing everybody. But Rand stopped listening, walled the man off to the buzzing of a fly. It was a trick he had learned inside the chest, when there was nothing to do but feel at the shield and listen to a voice in his head that was insane more often than not. Yet even without Lews Therin, he did not want to be healed by the man. He thought if Taim ever touched him with the power, however innocently, he would kill him. "As you wish," the hawk-nosed man said wryly. "I have the campsite secured, I believe." That seemed true enough. Bodies littered the ground, but in only a few places did men still fight inside the ring of wagons. A dome of air suddenly covered the entire camp, smoke from the fires sliding up to a hole left in the top. It was not one solid weave of saidin. Rand could see where individual weaves butted one against another to make it. He thought there might have been as many as 200 black-coated men beneath the dome. A hail of lightning and fire struck that barrier and exploded harmlessly. The sky itself seemed to crackle and burn. The constant roar of it filled the air. Maidens with strips of red dangling from their arms and Asha'man stood along the wall they could not see, mingled with Mayenners and Carrienin, many of them afoot as well. On the other side, a solid mass of Shaido stared at the invisible barricade, keeping them from their enemies, sometimes stabbing at it with spears or hurling themselves against it bodily. Spears stopped short, and bodies bounced back. Inside the dome, the last fighting died even as Rand looked. Under the eyes of a scant handful of red-marked men and maidens, disarmed Shaido were removing their garments with stolid faces. Taken in battle, they would wear gai'shain white for a year and a day, even if the Shaido somehow succeeded in overrunning the camp. Carrienin and Mayenners provided guards for a large knot of angry warders and younglings mixed with fearful servants, almost as many guards as prisoners. Nearly a dozen Aes Sedai were being shielded by an equal number of Asha'man, wearing sword and dragon. The Aes Sedai looked sick and frightened. Rand recognized 3, though Nasun was the only one he could name. He did not recognize any of their Asha'man jailers. A number of the women Rand had shielded and rendered unconscious were laid out with those prisoners, some of them beginning to stir, while black-coated soldiers and dedicated with the silver sword in their collars were using saidin to drag others across the ground and lay them in that row. Some of them brought the 2 unconscious Aes Sedai and the angular woman out of the copse. She was still screaming. When they were added to the cluster, some of the Aes Sedai abruptly turned away and vomited. There were other Aes Sedai present, surrounded by warders and watched by black-coated men, though not shielded, watching the Asha'man as uneasily as did the women under guard. They stared at Rand, too, and plainly would have come to him if not for the Asha'man. Rand glared back. Alanna was there. He had not been hallucinating. He did not recognize all of her companions, but enough. There were 9 altogether. 9. Sudden rage stormed outside the void, and Lews Therin's fly buzz grew louder. At that point, it seemed no surprise at all to see Perrin stagger up, face and beard bloody, followed by a limping Loial with a huge axe, and a bright-eyed fellow who looked a tinker, in a red-striped coat, except for the sword he carried, blade crimson from end to end. Rand almost looked around to see whether Mat was also there somehow. He did see Dobraine, on foot with a sword in one hand and the staff of Rand's crimson banner in the other. Nandera joined Perrin, letting her veil drop, and another maiden Rand almost did not recognize at first. It was good to see Sulin and cadin'sor once more. "Rand," Perrin gasped. "Thank the light you're still alive. We meant for you to make a gateway for us to escape, but it's all fallen to pieces. Ruark and most of the Aiel are still out among the Shaido. Most of the Mayenners and Carianen too. And I don't know what has happened to the Two Rivers folk or the Wise Ones. The Aes Sedai were supposed to stay with them, but..." Putting the head of his axe on the ground, he leaned on the shaft, panting. He looked as if he might fall without the support. Along the barrier, mounted men were appearing, as well as Aielmen in red headbands and maidens with strips of red dangling from their arms. The barrier held them out as well. Wherever they appeared, Shaido swarmed over them, swallowed them up. "Let the dome go," Rand ordered. Perrin sighed in relief, of all things. Had he thought Rand would let his own people be slaughtered? But Loial sighed too. Light, what did they think of him? Min began rubbing his back, murmuring under her breath in a soothing tone. For some reason, Perrin gave her a very surprised look. Taim might have been surprised, but he was certainly not relieved.
"My Lord Dragon,"
he said in a tight voice,
"I would say there are still several hundred Shaido women out there, some not insignificant it seems. And that is not to mention some thousands of Shaido with spears. Unless you truly want to find out whether you are immortal, I suggest waiting a few hours until we know this place well enough to make gateways with some certainty where they will come out. Then leaving. There are casualties in battle. I lost several soldiers today. 9 men who will be harder to replace than any number of renegade Aiel. Whoever dies out there dies for the Dragon Reborn."
If he had been paying any attention to Nandera or Sulin, he might have moderated his tone and chosen his words more carefully. Hand talk flashed between them. They looked ready to strike him down on the spot. Perrin pushed himself upright, yellow eyes fixed on Rand, firm and anxious at the same time. "Rand, even if Daniel and the Wise Ones held back the way they were supposed to, they'll not leave as long as they see this." He gestured to the dome overhead, where fire and lightning made a continuous sheet of light. "If we sit here for hours, the Shaido will turn on them sooner or later, if they haven't already. Light, Rand. Daniel and Ban and Will and Tell. Amis is out there, and Soralia, and... Burn you, Rand! More have died for you already than you know!" Perrin drew a deep breath. "At least let me out. If I can make it that far, I can let them know that you're alive, and they can retreat before they get killed."
"2 of us can slip out,"
Loial said quietly, hefting that huge axe.
2 will stand a better chance."
The Tinker only smiled, but almost eagerly. "I will have a place opened in the barrier," Taim began, but Rand broke in on him sharply. "No!" Not for the Two Rivers folk. He could not appear to worry over them any more than over the Wise Ones. Truth to tell, he had to seem to worry less. Amis was out there? The Wise Ones never took part in battle. They walked untouched through battles and blood feuds. They had ripped apart custom, if not law, to come for him. He would as soon let Perrin go back into that maelstrom as abandon them. But it could not be for the Wise Ones, or the Two Rivers folk. "Savannah wants my head, Taim. Apparently she thought she could take it today." The emotionless quality the void gave to his voice was appropriate. It did seem to worry Min, though. She was stroking his back as though to calm him. "I mean to let her know her mistake. I told you to make weapons, Taim. Show me just how deadly they are. Disperse the Shaido. Break them." "As you command." If Taim had been stiff before, he was stone now. "Put my standard up where they can see it," Rand commanded. At least that would tell everyone outside who held the camp. Maybe the Wise Ones and Two Rivers folk would pull back when they saw that. Loial's ears wriggled uneasily, and Perrin grabbed Rand's arm as Taim walked away.
I saw what they do, Rand. It's...
With his bloody face and bloody axe, he still sounded disgusted.
What would you have me do? Rand demanded. What else can I do?
Perrin's hand fell away, and he sighed.
I do not know. I do not have to like it, though. Brady, raise the banner of light,
Taim called, and the power made his voice boom. On flows of air, Jer Grady lifted the crimson banner out of a surprised Dobraine's hand and raised it all the way through the hole in the top of the dome. Fire burst around it, and lightning flashed as brilliant red lifted amid the smoke billowing up from the burning wagons. Rand recognized a number of the men in black coats, but he knew only a few names aside from Jer's. Damer and Fedwin and Eben, Jahar and Torville. Of those, only Torville wore the dragon on his collar.
Asha'man, form line of battle,
Taim boomed. Black-coated men rushed to place themselves between the barrier and everyone else. All of them except Jer and those watching Aes Sedai. Except for Nesun, who peered intently at everything, the tower lot had sunk listlessly to their knees, not even looking at the men who had them shielded. And even Nesun still looked on the point of sicking up. The Salidar group stared coldly at the Asha'man guarding them for the most part, though now and then they turned those icy eyes on Rand. Alanna stared only at Rand. His skin was tingled faintly, he realized. For him to feel it at that distance, all 9 must be embracing Salidar. He hoped they had enough sense not to channel. The stony men facing them held Saidin to bursting, and they looked as tense as the warders fingering their swords.
Asha'man, raise the barricade 2 spans!
At Taim's command, the edges of the dome rose all around. Surprised Shaido, who had been pushing at what they could not see, stumbled forward. They recovered instantly, a black-veiled mass surging forward. But they had time for only a stride before Taim's next shout.